You know, and and last time we talk about, our society, and we talk about morality issues. And today I want to just recap some of the stuff that we did today, last time. And when I feel in for Brother Cohen, and I just want to talk a little today about spiritualism versus sensationalism, because it's a topic that is that we have to deal with. There are situations that we have to confront, and no matter what we do, we have to face it um, head on, right? Because it's there and it's staring us in the face. And sometimes it is a taboo. Sometimes we really don't want to talk about it because, it it's something that we don't really want to engage, because there are so much feelings of us having to put out more of ourselves to deal with it, or expose more of ourselves to deal with it. And in so doing, we tend to shy away from the topic because it demands that we take a side. It demands that uh, we put out a view, and it also tells us that we need to do something, you know, and we have to act. When we see certain things in society taking place, we have to confront it. And if we don't confront it, then what happens is that we create a ground, or we create the ground for sin to strive. And this is not what God's intention is for us. His intention is that when wrong is done, we need to confront it. We need to point it out. He gives us guidelines as to how to do it and what we must do in order to confront it. But sin must always be called out for what it is. And the more we understand, the more we learn, and the more we grow into maturity, the more we are able, our fight becomes bigger, and the fight becomes such that um, this is what we do on a daily basis, because sin is something that we have to deal with everywhere we go. In many instances, the people that we associate with, we have to sometimes point out that, look, what you're doing is not right, or this is the way that God would like you to do it, or, right? We have to find ways in order to point it out. And, I was saying Sunday, there are times when you have to call out sin for what it is. And there are times when we cannot afford to pamper it. And because of that, right, we got to know. And it requires a certain kind of character in order to be able to stand, you know, um, and make that difference and make yourself count. Because sometimes, yeah, when we stand for sin, sometimes we save many lives, and we help people to go down the road where they could live, a more peaceable life. Sometimes we stand in the gap of people, and what happens is that later down the road, when we point out what the action was and how detrimental it is, sometimes we don't always get the reward that is due, and but later down the road, somebody might turn around and say, boy, it's a good thing you told me that, I'm going down a wrong path, and he was able to arrest the situation. And they thank you for it, because they realize now that, look, had they gone down that path, then life would have been so, so different, you know. And what I have realized is that every door that we open, it carries with it a journey. It carries with it reward, consequences. Sometimes some carry more reward than consequences. But every door that we open, we have to deal with what is behind that door, right? So on the last occasion, as we deal with confronting acceptable sin, and under that heading, we would talk about sensational spirituality versus spirituality. Let's recap a few things that we spoke on the last time, we talk about morality in society today is on a downward spiral, right? And you don't have to go out of your way to see that. It's all around, right? And what is happening is that the sad news is that it is becoming acceptable, right? That is the sad news in it. It is becoming acceptable, and people are accepting wrongdoing as the standard by which we live our lives, and it is so repeated. And it is so ingrained now in society that it becomes the norm. And when it becomes the norm, we think that, well, that is the practice. Sometimes people, I sometimes, while walking, I see people would come and they will tell you that, look, hey, you're going to the tool room. Hey, I want this. I want this. Hey, it have more in this. Well, it have a particular piece of material. Hey, I want that. I want that. I have to do something home. And they just take it and it becomes the norm. Everybody, hey, yeah. They get stocks here, right? Okay, we take it, we carry it home. And you wonder, well, wow, you know, um, it has become the norm, and nobody even frown on it, you know. And if you talk about it, they watch you as though, hey, something wrong with you. You different, and this is what society, when we talk about morality, we are talking about morality, right and wrong is now out the door, right? Or in fact, doing right or doing good is now out the door. Anything goes. And we'll talk a little on that in a short while. And good people are no longer standing for right and good behavior. And as a result, we are losing our moral backbone, right? When good people do nothing, sin prevails, right? And this is what is happening now with a lot of people in society. People are a lot of good people who know better, who is practicing good. They are not standing up when wrong is being done, right? And a lot of times we could understand, but it doesn't mean that we don't do anything. We just have to find different ways to communicate the right things, right? Because you cannot condone sin. Sometimes we see people, somebody telling the lies, and somebody full-blown lie they're telling, and you know different because you have had the experience, the background experience, exposure, and you know that the person is talking wrong. And we just let it go, right? No interaction, no behind-the-scene conversation, nothing. We just leave it. Like them business, let them see about that. And it just goes on. And the person who perpetrates it, nobody tells him nothing. So there is no arrest. There is nobody to look at to say, well, this wasn't going to stop me from doing that. That person is in the room, and I have to curtail my language, and I have to watch what I'm saying. If we don't say anything, nothing is going to be done. And if we allow society to go down a road, all that's going to happen in society is that society is just it's just going to go down the road, or as I say, down the drain, right? When good people do nothing, right? So rooted moral belief systems are being replaced by moral subjectivism, right? And secular humanistic behavior or ideals, right? And what we mean by that, moral subjectivism, right, is a philosophy, right? And it deals with, or it carries the idea that that there is no system of absolute right and wrong, right? So there is no system of absolute right and wrong. In fact, it is left up to an individual to decide what is right and what is wrong, right? And I was trying to get an example for this year. I didn't complete the example properly, but I will just shed some light on it at this point in time, right? So we have this thing called abortion, right? And it's always a contentious issue and a topic. And what happens is today in today's society, people have opposing views on abortion. Some say, some say, some people say that, look, it is my body and I have the right to do whatever I want to do with my body. It is mine, right? As opposed to the view is that we are children of God. God has put law in place, and we ought to follow God laws by not taking life, right? And then there's the other view that states that we didn't create life, and why should we take life, right? Because what goes on inside of the body when a child is or in pregnancy is that you really can't control basically anything that goes on while the child is growing. You can't tell the child when to feed. The body dispenses. The body has a system that is designed to say, well, look, all right, it's feeding time now. And it feeds through the placenta or the umbilical cord. And you can't tell the child how fast to grow. You can't tell the child how much food to eat. We don't have any control. A human being has no control, really, on how the process of the child development, right? It has no control. And what you find happening is that we want to take, we want to give ourselves control as to who should live and who should not live. And I just bring this point just to emphasize the moral, where morality has come, right? We are deciding what is good and we are deciding what is not good, what is right and what is wrong. We are deciding that, right? And this is what makes this whole society, on edge, because we are no longer referring to a standard. Your standard is your standard. So everything that we do is now about what you think and what you believe. Your belief system is your standard. My belief system is my standard, right? But isn't there ultimate standard by which we ought to live by? And everybody having a moral code to work with. We have to know that, look, there is a standard. And this is what makes the Bible so unique, because the Bible provides a standard by which we refer to and by which we conduct our affairs and how we live and how we get things done, right? The Bible tells us that, right? And this is a standard. So we don't have to invent our own standard. There are plenty of things about life we don't know, right? Yeah, the general stuff, we would know about, but plenty of things we don't know. And we always have to have a standard that is comprehensive and gives us guideline on any matter that pertains to life and godliness, right? Then there is, in the moral belief system, one of the things that perpetrates or permeates is the word I'm looking for, right? The idea that is permeated through humanistic behavior is that this system voids religious thoughts. It voids reasoning and any mention of God, except to say that God does not exist, right? So we live in a world today where there is no thought of God, right? So anything that when we speak of God, we are literally speaking ill. We are speaking a curse. We are saying things that that's supposed to be outlawed in the human language. Because as far as the humanistic ideology is concerned, there is no God. And human beings are responsible for their own destiny, right? This is one. And if you look at Jeremiah, chapter 10 and verse 23, is a popular verse. And it's common throughout, the Christian fraternity. And this is what Jeremiah said: "O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that he walketh to direct his steps." Man is not responsible, or shouldn't be responsible, for directing his own step. So God intervened, and he's letting us know that, look, hey, man cannot direct himself. He cannot guide himself because man is sin. And he has to understand that, look, he has to appear before a righteous God, and he needs to know what is righteous, what is righteousness, right? And God has set a standard by which we could refer to, so that we will be able to be guided as to what God's standard is and what God's standard should be in our lives. And unless we don't understand, or we don't bring ourselves to that place to refer or reference God as the standard, then our lives is going to be anyhow. And sooner or later, we're going to run into headwinds. We're going to run into roadblocks, because there are going to come a time where we're not following the principles of God, and our lives are going to start to experience a lot of hardship, right? And sometimes we reach to the point where we don't know what to do. Some people cry, some people shut down, some people commit suicide, some people involve themselves into behaviors that is unbecoming, because they reach a roadblock and they just don't know what to do, and they just do anything just to try to get out of the situation, right? And sometimes you wonder why some celebrities, find themselves, the more they get is the more they want, and they never really fully satisfied, right? And they do things, they spend money on things, and they use their body for all forms of evil, right? To get that satisfaction, right? And they have gone wrong simply because they decided that, look, they are going to pursue their own moral code and moral ideologies, right? Right and wrong resides in them. But as long as we continue to think that way, our life will not be guided, our life will not be protected, as was said by Jeremiah in verse 10 in chapter 10 and verse 23. Right? So we got to understand that. Right? Humanists would say that anything that cannot be empirically proven is false. How could you prove that there is a God when you cannot see God? Right? How could you prove that? And this is what humanists, the humanistic society has geared itself to do, to prove that there is not a God, right? And that human beings are responsible or masters of their own destiny. And we are getting that idea coming across every day on a daily basis, right? People are no longer accepting God's word as the standard. A lot of people are moving away from that, and society is plunging deeper and deeper into a wreck, right? But One thing I want us to know and to be mindful of, right, is that a lot of a lot of a lot of a lot of humanistic ideas are being promoted through the media, whatever form of media, mainstream media, social media, right, through documentary, whatever the medium is, a lot of um, humanistic ideas are being subtly, and some ideas have already been established and continues to be so, right? There was a time, probably um, a few decades ago, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when television had now newly came out, right? You couldn't talk, you couldn't see people, and you can't even see a woman dressed in bikini. They always dressed in these, um, thick, type of dress. I don't know the name of it, but forgive me. Um, but as time rolls on, you realize that clothing has become more skimpy and more skimpy till it is almost clothing has almost non-existent on some persons, right? And mainstream media is telling you that look, this is the way that society is going, and you need to accept that, right? And then there is the introduction of homosexuality, in so many subtle ways. We call it subliminal messages or messaging, right? Where they slightly introduce you, right? You see two persons of the same gender, a slight kiss, and then, right, okay, that is enough for you today, right? But now it's getting more and more um, open. It is getting more and more deliberate. And now they have brought it to a point where they want you, the audience, to believe that this is acceptable behavior. So at one time, adultery was being promoted. They have gotten through with that. So adultery is okay. That is the norm. People does that. Everybody doing that, right? And this is what they want you to believe, right? They want you to believe now that homosexuality is all right. They promote that, right? And they are getting there. And in fact, it has reached a place where actual movies are being built on that, right? And what we're seeing is that a slow de um, degradation of society. Society is continuing to be standards are being lowered all the time, right? And it is getting worse and worse, right? Um, Bible talks about I think it's in Ephesians. I think it's in Ephesians, where he said the heart of man is waxing whole or worse and worse, right? You will see that in the latter time, and we live in the latter time, right? And you see it every day that the hearts of men, it is waxing very cold, right? And we got to understand our role in society, right? So, but one thing I want us to know is that, and there's this last point here on humanism, is that humanism has influence to force God out of the public eyes, right? And replace him, right? Or replace it with personal freedom, right? So humanistic eyes is to create more and more moral concepts that is not the normal, not biblical, right? And replace it with acts that that is against God, but make it look like it's everybody doing it, it's all right? And you have the freedom to choose. We live in a society, freedom is it, right? Freedom is it. Freedom means that, but I have the right to do whatever I want, right? So says some people. Whatever I want to do, I have the freedom to do it. Sometimes we for those who understand carnival, right? Carnival Monday and Tuesday, and even before and after those days, right? People behave tell themselves, look, I'm going to free up, I'm going to have a good time, and some people look for that, right? And they do just that, right? And but God is saying to us that this is what humanism promotes, and humanism promotes it, and Satan promotes his way through humanistic ideologies, right? And we got to be careful about the ideologies that we look at and we practice, because the more we tend to cling towards these things and think, well, lewd behavior is all right, then we are losing ourselves in the process, right? Christians, but one thing I want to say also too is that, let me just finish this point here before I go on. One thing I want to say is that in America, especially in public schools, the loss of Christian tradition and traits are gradually being vanished away. You can no longer have service in schools, public schools. You could no longer have praying in schools, right? Anything that is related to God, humanistic, humanism has places influence, and these things are being removed, right? Even down to the dollar and all too, that is in contention, right? Because on the American dollar, if you've ever seen or looked at an American dollar or any one of the denominations, one of the things that you're going to see to the back of it, at the top, you're going to say, "In God we trust." And there is debate on that, to remove that from that, right? To remove that statement from the dollar, right? And it's actively being pursued. I don't think they have gotten through as yet, but it is actively being pursued. And what you're going to start to see is that we are gradually pushing God out of society. And when God is out of a society, the society becomes empty, right? And anything could happen, right? You look at Sodom and Gomorrah, right? When God came out of the picture, right? That's the whole society went down, right? Till Abraham had to ask the angel of the Lord, Lord, if there is 50 people, will you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? Will you destroy the cities? He said, no, for 50's sake, I will not. And then he talk, and conversation reached out. Lord, if we reach the 10 people, if there's 10 righteous people, will you destroy Sodom and Gomorrah? He says, for 10's sake, I will not destroy. Once there's a small number, a small elect in a society, God holds the society together. He still works with the society. But when there is low influence of God or no influence of God, anything could happen. And you see how man could behave, when we read Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis, right? How men could really behave without God. And we see it every day. And this is what is filtering through our society. But the Christians should not be afraid of their devices or what is being put out today and what is being practiced. We live in a world today where we have to stand out, right? And yes, we might be ridiculed, we might be persecuted. All of these comes with the fact that when sin dominates a land, these are the things that Christians have to deal with, right? But what we see and happening even in our today's society, right? As we talk about sensualism, what we see happening in our society is that as time passes, society and cultural norms are adjusted, right? And it would, because man advanced in technology and understand a lot of principles and put more things in place. Society is going to evolve. It is going to be transformed, right? And no matter the transformation, right? Because man is a being that is progressive, right? God made us to be progressive, right? And we are always going to advance, right? In our thinking, in our lives, no matter how much we say we want to go back to the old time days, are not going to happen, right? Like just wishful thinking and forget it. Are not going to happen. We have to deal with what is in front of us, right? And but the Christian today is plagued with sensualism, right? Sometimes we think that, well, I'm not impacted, but yes, we are. We are. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 19. Right, and let's see what it has to say. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 19. This is what Paul says, right? He says that who being in time past. Okay, let's read from verse 18. So just get a little more context, right? Having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feelings have given themselves over unto lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness and greediness, right? But you have not so learned Christ. Okay, let's pause there. Right? So he's saying that, look, there was a time that you were given over to lasciviousness, uncleanness, with greediness, right? The sexual moral conduct here he's talking about. And he's saying that, look, there was a time when you was involved in that, right? And and all of these fall under sensualism, right? Let me just look at this, look at something quickly. Sensualism is the belief that the main source of knowledge comes from sensory experience and perception, right? So when we talk about sensualism, right, we are talking really about the use of our senses, right, being the main source of uh, of our pleasure, the main source of what we do for pleasing self. And what God is saying to us, is that sensualism sometimes is highlighted in such a way in today's society that it looks attractive. We see today in society, we see that companies want to advertise a product, right? And what we see happening is that, they will put a woman in a bikini, and they will flaunt her, right, on the product, and they tie the product to what's the word I want to use, right? Sensuality. They tie to that, and you got to understand they use their psychology in such a way that they have, when they want to attract men, they use women. When they want to attract women, they use men. When they want to attract babies and children, they have other sources that they use in order to bring them out, games and toys and stuff like that, and all to create sensuality, right? So that the whole idea is that they want you to buy into the product. But in so buying into the product now, we got to be careful that we don't reduce our standards, right? By by really soaking in these arts and these efforts that these companies put out in order to bring you in, or to draw you in to changing your mindset. That's the whole idea behind all of this, changing your mindset, right? Many Christians have created a sense of safety in thinking that we are not as bad as those people, as those Christians in the first century, right? The truth is, we are just as bad, right? Because even though the society back then in the first century, right, is not equated, or shouldn't be equated to the society that we live in terms of, right, okay, we have modern day, we have cars, we have we have buses, we have planes, we have tall buildings, we have serious architect taking place, right? The societies are different, right? But the people are the same, right? People adopt a culture. And when we look at the standard that God has set, regardless of the society that we live in, when we compare what we're doing in every society to measure, to look at God's standard, or to measure to God's standard, many times we are found wanting, right? Because we find ourselves not really living to God's standard, no matter the society. But in today's society, where we feel we have all of this, we have phone, we have social media, we have this, we have that, all kinds of technology we have at our doorstep, we sometimes feel, well, okay, we're rich, right? They have a next society that is better than us. And that is a false sense of, security, because every society has their challenges to deal with. Yes, today's society have solved many of the challenges that would have gone by, but new challenges comes, and it still maintains that the word of God is the standard by which we, as a Christian, the standard by which we ought to refer anything that we do in society, refer back to the scriptures. We must be able to do that, and what has happened as we begin to launch down into, or land this Bible class? What is happening with today's society is that the idea of living for this, we have gotten to a place where we begin to have, or our sole purpose is to please self. That's what society is coming down to. So what we have in society is, in many instances, people are living to suit or to please themselves. They want all the gadget. They want all the technology. They want the latest in this. They want the latest in that. And this is what we have, what we are exposed to in today's society. We want a big house. We want a fancy car. We want gadgets. We want systems that will make us safe. And as we employ all of that to fulfill our self desires, sometimes God gets locked out of our lives, and because He gets locked out, right? Sometimes the craving that we have sometimes becomes now our enemy, and sometimes the enemy invites you to partake of all of these things that life has to offer, all the goodies that life has to offer. But there at some point in time, there is payback time. And that's why many people, as we read in the book of Ephesians 19, right? what we find happening is that as we begin to indulge, right, our conscience begins to be said or snared, be branded. That sometimes you don't know how you reach there. The more we take in and the more we sensitize ourselves with what is taking place in the world, God gradually begins to fade out if we don't check ourselves. Nothing is wrong. I'm not saying anything is wrong with having the goodies of the world. But always measure it up. That must never take first place in your life. And the car becomes more important than God, we have a problem. When the house becomes more important than God, we have a problem. And gradually, a lot of Christians have fallen by the wayside because of that same conduct, right? There is a passage here that I'm looking through. I didn't get the time that I wanted to really search some of the scriptures that I would have normally want to grab hold of. But this is what Timothy, Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1 and 2. He said, "Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their conscience seared with a hot iron." Right? This is what, if we are not careful as Christians, and we start to become sensationalized by bringing in all the world goods into our space, and goods, not only goods, but attitudes into our space, then it is slowly branding our conscience. And when it brands the conscience, right and wrong goes out the door. Yeah, watchman. I have spoken to people who have fallen away. And sometimes they will tell you things like, well, the reason why I don't come to church is that, I could serve God home. I don't need to come to church to serve God. Some will tell you that, I better than plenty of the hypocrites that come into church, who say they come into church, and we get all that kind of attitude when we start to intake or import all the world goods into our lives. And eventually, at some point, what happens is that what comes into us begins to replace what is in us. The righteousness that is in us, it starts to replace it. And when it's begin to replace it, and it gradually and eventually replaces it, we have problems. We have a lot of problems, right? So you don't want your conscience to be seared. As much as we enjoy the world goods, make sure that that does not take priority over God. Let God always be the number one in your life. Let God always be the standard by which you live. Anything else that comes your way, we have to match it against God. And if it is not right, we reject it. Talk about it. And so that our conscience will always be right with God. Right? You want it to be that way. So God is the standard. As we sensualize, we try to feed our senses, the touch, taste, the sight, the hear, the speak. when we begin to satisfy the senses or the natural man, when we talk about the sensual man is really the natural man that we're talking about, right? But we begin to talk about the natural man. What happens is the natural man begins to take over, right? And when he takes over, it is very different from Christianity, right? From God's standard that God projects, right? So I see 7:59 on my screen here. And more or less, just one point I just want to, right? And I will just close with that. We ought to please the Father, right? And to live the life of a Christian, we got to please the Father, right? So let me just read one verse. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse number 1. This is how God wants it, and this is how God wants our lives to be as we consider spirituality, right? Spirituality is there so that we will promote the Spirit of God in our lives, right? So that when we are confronted with sensualism, right, always let spiritualism prevail, right? And this is one way to do it, as the Bible coaches us in this. It says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse number 1, he says, furthermore, then we beseech you, brethren, and exhort you by our Lord, or by the Lord Jesus Christ, that as you have received of us how you ought to walk and to please God, so you would abound more and more, right? So Paul is telling these Thessalonians that, you ought to please God, and your walk have to be such that it is pleasing to God, that you will abound more and more. God must be the center of your life. And when God is the center of your life, you're going to make a difference in the lives of people. Right? Because you have access to the Father, you have access to the throne, and you have access to wisdom, and you have access to help. Right? So whatever the situation you might be confronting, tell yourself you're not alone. You have God that is in the picture that will help you to overcome and to be able to live the life that you want to live. Right? So that is the end of my presentation for today. And